Welcome back, dear viewers. And as you've seen on your screens, the day of Arba'in is edging ever closer. And in a sense, the electrifying atmosphere has reached almost its pinnacle when it comes to people visiting Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They're coming from all sides, all corners of the globe in order to pledge their allegiance to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I'm joined in this segment of Verses of Love by my dear guest Nouri Sardar, who joins us once again for some fascinating discussions and insights into poetry and the land of poetry and the world of poetry. I've learned a lot over my journey of the last couple of episodes, especially since having a deep dive into your personal life and how that's affected poetry and how that's affecting your view on poetry and how you write poetry, the effect of ziyarah as well. I want to really bring it all together and give actionable recommendations to up and coming poets, spoken word poets, reciters even, on what they can do, what steps they need to take in order to be successful, but in a sense be who they are and be able to showcase their talents to the world. So I've personally, just before you do, I've personally put in 5 different points, and you probably will agree or disagree. It's first and foremost, they really need to learn the message, and then clear their intention, learn the techniques, know the audience, and then just be themselves.
Yeah.
That's probably the journey that usually they
I think in terms of specifically writing a poem, the first thing that you got to think about is the actual idea. I think every poem has to encompass an idea, and the way you write it. And one thing I learned from Jabbar Kadami, which is beautiful, what he says, he goes, "I have never written the same poem twice," which means that if he's written a poem about a specific topic, let's say for example the topic is Abbas speaking to the river, for example, Yishat al-Maut, that poem, it's all about that topic. Meaning you cover every aspect of that topic from beginning to end, and you never have to touch that topic again. So the next time you write about Abbas alayhi salam, you can write it from a new perspective, new metaphor. I think that's the most important thing. You got to think about every time I sit down to write a poem, the first thing I think about is what is the idea that I want to portray? What metaphor do I want to use? It has to be something that I've never heard before, something that people who listen to it have never heard before, something that's very original. That's what separates a good poem from a subpar poem.
Yeah.
And that extends again to couplets or spoken word poetry or whatever kind of what you're doing. Ultimately, poetry is emotions on paper. It's your emotions on paper. So you're just translating your emotions into written form. And I think that's the most important thing. More than anything else is the idea.
The idea.
You're writing a story ultimately. So you got to know what story you're writing, know how you're going to get from, know how you're going to cover the story from beginning to end. And then in that, once you're in that process of writing, that extends to each and every single line. So one thing I failed in over the years is not being meticulous enough with each and every single line. You have to be, every single line has to be there for a reason. Every single line is there to tell us a story for a reason, a story within the greater story of the poem. Third thing I would say that people, a trap that people fall into, including myself, is rhyming for the sake of rhyming. So just right now before the show started, I was working with a reciter on one of my poems, and the rhyme of the verse was a bound and pound and stuff like that. And one of the lines that was in the poem, which I'll recite today, was in yearning of Hussein's grave, my head I'd pound. And again, like, I don't think the rhyme, I think that is an unfortunate case of the rhyme overtaking the
idea.
The idea, like you're rhyming for the sake of it. So that's something I'm working on.
That's very difficult to do because the English language or the vocabulary is very limited, isn't it?
It's very hard. I think with Arabic poetry, with Urdu poetry, with Iranian poetry, it's very easy because the language flows. For Arabic, for one word, you have 24 different meanings, or 24 different words for one meaning. English is very limited, so it's very, very tough. But once you're in that mindset, once you've been doing it for long enough, once you're used to it, that's when you can really master the art. And I think, again, going back to being true to yourself, you just got to write it in a way that is true to what you believe. So me, for example, it sounds funny, but I watch a lot of film and TV. Yeah. So sometimes when I'm writing, I remember a certain scene that I've seen, or a certain, a way someone has fought with his sword, and I try to depict that in my poetry. So other people might have different interests, different things they see in their life, different things they experience, which they should put into their poetry. I remember someone once told me that I can learn a lot about you, speaking to me, just by reading your poetry. And that's true, because your poetry is always going to be a reflection of yourself. It should always reflect your experiences. Even in storytelling, they say that a lot of people, successful storytellers, For example, J.K. Rowling and all these people that write, whenever they write stories, a lot of what they're writing is in some way or another a depiction of things that happen in their own lives as well. So it's important to take that and put it in your poetry as well.
Yeah. So first you start off with the idea from what you're mentioning. What's the next step after that?
So if you're writing a noha or a latmiya, it all goes to the chorus. To quote Jalal Qadmi again, he says, once I've written the chorus to a poem, I know what the rest of the poem is going to be. So the chorus, for example, has to encompass everything the story is going to be about. It's the main thing. And it becomes hard when, let's say, for example, if I'm writing for you, for example, I know you're going to recite. I think, for example, okay, he's going to recite in this center or that center. I know the crowd there. So the chorus, for example, if you're going to recite at a certain center, it has to be simple. But at the same time, it has to be good enough to be a chorus. But at the same time, it has to be powerful. At the same time, it has to be, simple enough to recite and so it's really hard. It's not easy at all.
And so the chorus is basically we said the anwan. So the chorus is like
the source of the source or the summary of the poem. It's the summary of the poem. It says everything you're going to talk about from therein.
Okay,
I think that's very important.
All right, so you've got the idea, and then you're looking into the chorus of the poem, and this is the chorus obviously is depending on if you're writing a traditional latmiya.
Of course. Again,
what happens if you're doing spoken poetry? What happens then?
Thing is that's a whole new avenue that I'm still dabbling in, so I can't give you a definitive answer to that in terms of structurally, but definitely I would say it's the same kind of idea. Let's say, for example, with the Grenfell poem that I wrote, I knew from the beginning that I wanted to touch on both Grenfell and my experiences growing up in a similar environment. So I made sure that I had that poem to encompass all of that. And again, following the same rules, I would never write the same poem again. If I wrote about Grenfell again, it would be from a different perspective. I think
so. It wouldn't be, for example, the main idea behind Grenfell was your experiences growing up in a similar building.
Yes. So if I was to write it again, I wouldn't speak about my experiences again because I've done that now. I don't need to do it again. And that's the whole point. Once you've tackled it, you're done. You don't need to do the same thing again. So you can write about Grenfell again, for sure, but then different perspective. So I'd have to think about a whole new way to tell that same story. And that's the idea.
Okay, so in terms of, let's just assume that we're writing a traditional latmiya. We've started off with the idea, we've put a chorus, so our idea has to be summarized in a chorus, and that chorus is dependent on the audience, dependent on the center, or whatever it may be. After the chorus, what happens?
Then you start to tell the story. So then after the chorus, depending on, I think all languages and all kind of different types of recitation kind of follow the same rules, but you got verses after verses. So you want to tell a specific story, so you just use your number of verses, let's say 1 to 8, to tell that story. So for example, going back to the example of Ishat al-Maut, an Arabic poem by Jalal Qadmi, where Abbas is speaking to the river. So the story starts off with him setting out from the camp, going toward the river, reaching the river, speaking to the river, throwing the water back, and then heading back towards the camp, and then ultimately passing away. So you already know what the story is going to be once you start writing it. And I think using Abbas's story, that's probably the perfect way to understand how a latmiya should work, because every Abbas latmiya is going to be the same thing. It's going to start off with him at the camp. It's going to him going towards the water, and then him coming back and ultimately dying. But each different poem focuses on different rules. So Ya Abu Satain by Jabir as well is him speaking to his dad, Imam Ali, and saying, "I done what you asked." It's the same story, but it's from that perspective. Then you got other poems, for example, he's speaking to Sayyidah Zainab, or Sayyidah Zainab's telling him, for example, I wish you came back. But it's still the same story, but it's just told from that perspective, and I think that's the best way to kind of describe it.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got an idea, we've got a summary in the chorus, we then put the idea into different verses. The story that you're telling is into different verses. What happens after that, Nouri?
Then you finish the poem.
And then you finish the poem. Okay, so all right, so then after that, there comes a couple of different things. You can either keep it with your own collection, reflect upon it, know that you've got this in your repertoire, or know that you've written something about that. But then the whole point of why poets or up and coming poets want it is because they want to put it out there so people can listen to. If you were starting up, not now, if you were starting up, what's the first thing you'll do?
Post online.
You wouldn't, for example, want to get reviewed? Or does it matter?
So I think when I started off,
me
posting it online, I'm a bit daring in that I just throw it out there and then wait for the feedback afterwards. But that is how I would get my feedback. Unless you have a circle of good critical friends. This is very important. You can get friends who just say everything you're writing is amazing. You can also get very critical friends. I'm in a circle of friends who are very critical of my work. Some people support it, some people are like, don't really understand it. But it's important to gauge that criticism in every which way, and then take on the criticism that you feel is correct. The criticism that you don't feel understands your work completely, you can leave that aside. But that is how ultimately you build your poem. And again, like you ask about someone starting up, there is no way to make it. There is no set way to go out there and become a poet that's known by everyone. All I would say is that, number one, share your poetry on different platforms. Look at currently today, it's Instagram. I would say is the biggest way to share your poetry, or Twitter. In 10 years' time, it will be a completely different way to share your poetry. But use those platforms ultimately to share it. Like we've been saying again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Be true to yourself. Be sincere, because anything that's sincere is what touches the hearts. I think one of the most famous poets now, again, I don't want to, she's quite controversial, so I don't want people to go and I know it's Islamic channel, I don't want people to start going looking up her stuff, but Rupi Kaur is one of the, probably the most successful Insta poet there is alive today. Her poetry isn't all that, it's not incredibly deep, but because it's sincere, because it speaks to people, because they feel like it relates to them, that's why they enjoy it, that's why they like it.
Relatable.
Yeah, it's relatable. Not just relatable, but it comes from a place that's real. And that's what people appreciate.
Okay, so going to different platforms, social media, I wanted to go back to the verses again. In terms of the techniques of making a good poem, writing a good story, what would you advise on that?
Ultimately, you're a storyteller, so you need to be original. That's all it is. You need to be original. You need to be intimate. You need to be true to yourself. Again, saying it for the 1,000th time. And you just need to. It's like doing a work of art. I mean, we can sit here and talk about technicalities all day long, but ultimately, I can't tell someone how to paint a picture.
Yeah.
Only they can do it. They know the tools. They know the which way. They know how other people do it. They can learn the skills to make it better. But ultimately, only they can paint that image. And then moving on from that, it's ironic because it's not up to us to interpret our poetry. And this is one thing that I struggled with as well, because I remember when I used to have my Facebook profile, I made it into a page afterwards. When I used to have the profile, I used to post out poems, and people used to say, "What do you mean? What does that mean? What does this mean?" And I used to sit there and reply to them. And I felt that devalued the poetry so much, because the poetry is not there for me to explain it. It's art. You put it out there, people can take what they want, they can argue about it, they can debate what it means, but to sit there and explain it is to devalue it.
Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, people have to people will take in what they can of it.
Yeah.
There's
a growing sense within poetry and writing English poetry that it more or less follows the same format of, I love Hussein, he has an inspiration in my life, I'll make so many sacrifices about him, look at the sacrifices that he's done for Islam, we should be sending the message to the non-Muslims. It's following the same format, and to be honest with you, they're not of a great quality. Number one, from my perspective, to recite it, especially since reciting English can be a bit difficult in a sense, in its own, and then actually reciting a poem which is really, really that deep. How would you then go tell kids or the youth, look, we appreciate that you love Imam Hussein, but is that really a poem?
Thing is, ultimately, all my poems do that anyway. They do the same thing. Every poem that I write is essentially that. I love Imam Hussein, and this is my sacrifice for him, but it's just told in a different way. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to originality. We all want to say the same story. We all want to tell the same message, right? But it's about how you tell it. That's all it is. Every poem about, again, going back to the metaphor of Abbas's Musibah, every poem about Abbas's Musibah is telling Abbas's Musibah. It didn't happen 1,000 ways, it happened one way. But it's the way you tell it, the perspective in which you tell it from. That's going to make all the difference. And I think that's what people need to appreciate. And again, going back to making sure that each line is there for a reason. Each rhyme is there for a reason. You're not rhyming pain with Hussein because it's easy. You can still rhyme pain with Hussein, but it depends what you're using to rhyme, what you're using that rhyme for, what you're saying. And that's ultimately what it's about. It's about painting an image that no one else has heard before. And that's a challenge. It's not an easy process whatsoever. It's hard.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, to write a good poem, that's what you need.
Brilliant. Well, look, Nouri, I'd love to bring everything that we've learned from you all together, and to get a rendition of one of your poems. I'm sure you have something.
This poem, ironically, the misuse of the rhyme that I said before is in this poem. So forgive me, it's not 100%.
Head-eye pound.
Yeah, head-eye pound. But this poem basically is about Arba'in. Obviously, we're here today to commemorate Arba'in. and we're here to remember the message of Arba'in. And this is something I thought of when I was there in the shrine, looking at the shrine and just wishing that I was there every single Arba'in, and I was there. I would always be given the opportunity to do his ziyarah. The year I don't see his grave, that's the year that I become blind. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. Be it that I'm full of youth or that I'm frail and old, his shrine gives me warmth, and without it I'm frail and cold. His shrine gives me warmth, and without it I'm frail and cold. God forgive me if on Judgment Day I am asked when I am called, you missed Arba'in once. Of its greatness weren't you told? When I'm called for questioning, with dust in my hair I'll come, holding the flag that I held when I walked to Ali's son. Whatever I lost in life, on that walk so much more I'd find. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. I smelt the dust of heaven, walking upon that road. The dust that rose travelled with me to heaven's abode. Perhaps because the flood of Noah's ark once flowed. Perhaps because the flood of Noah's ark here once flowed. And upon it the ship of salvation Hussein had rowed. I saw waves flow to his grave. Waves of souls and of people. And I saw him take them all with him. With his ship he had set sail. The people he took with him on the road to him had dined. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured that is the day I've died. It was once upon this road that they walked as captives, and yet alongside her daughters know that Zainab still lives. I see that flags into our hands Ruqayya's hand gives, and the walk of Hashim's queen every walker relives. But remember as we walk, as in our eyes trickle tears, we all walk by Mawakib, we all walk beside Mawakib. Zainab walked by heads on spears. The stars that sit in the sky with Mawakib are aligned. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. Yes, we walk yearly on this road, the road of the free. But would we return, if impossible it would be? Recall those who were executed for walking on this way. Those who when they reached Hussein's grave, for their own lives they'd pray. Oh Allah, make me of those when by Hussein's grave they would stand, had no left hand to be cut, so had offered their right hand. When presented with their deaths, for Hussein they gladly signed. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. The walk to heaven, it is reserved for the courageous. Every step is a Hajj and Umrah, and God's house is Hussein's house. When I see my flag flutter, I see fall terrorists. Those blessed to walk this road are reserved for greatness. No, I am not arrogant, but I know well of my worth, and those that kill us on this road cannot be of pure birth. I saw those who know of God leave their work and home behind. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. Those who believe, those who visit, believe in God and in God alone. As the narrations say, it's like visiting Allah's throne. The believers cry as on His grave themselves they have thrown. The believers cry as on His grave their bodies they have thrown, saying peace be upon the flesh that still remains on these bones. As we hold on to those bars and wonder what is heaven, if it's not here saluting the last of Ali's children. We thank Allah, for we are the luckiest of mankind. The Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. The day I die and my body is placed into the ground. In distress of yearning Hussein's grave, my own head I would pound. But know that if any miss me, to return I'll be bound. Every Arba'in, on that walk my soul can be found. Take a glimpse at those walking, you'll find me still amongst them. Oh, you'll find me at the road's end, in His shrine doing martyrdom. And if any need a prayer, just ask my grave, I won't mind. Because the Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. The year I don't see his grave, that is the year I become blind. And the Arba'in that I'm not there, rest assured, is the day I've died. And I pray inshallah everyone gets a chance to visit Imam Hussein's grave in Arba'in every year, inshallah.
Many thanks for your time, Nouri Sardar. We really appreciate your time, your efforts on this season of Morning Baraka. The audience as well would love to give their appreciation to your time as well, and the many fabulous insights into the world of poetry from Nouri Sardar's perspective, how it's changed, what's going to be shaping the future, the different techniques, and as well as really, I think the main thing was just staying true to yourself, be yourself when you're writing the poetry. Nouri, thank you so much for your time. Up next on Dear Ma'sooma, as part of the Morning Baraka program, Zahra and Ma'sooma Jafar will be taking your questions and queries, so stay tuned for that. Zahra, over to you.